Marcus Rivera sat at his desk and stared at the computer screen. The email had arrived 10 minutes ago, but he still could not believe what he was reading. The message was short and simple. Principal Henderson wanted to meet with him on Friday afternoon to discuss his continued employment status. Those words felt like a punch in the stomach. Marcus knew exactly what they meant. After 12 years of teaching at Lincoln High School, he was about to lose his job. He leaned back in his chair and looked around his empty classroom. The walls were covered with posters of famous writers and quotes about the power of reading. Books filled the shelves along the back wall. This room had been his second home for more than a decade. He had spent countless hours here, teaching students about literature, helping them write essays, and sharing his love of stories. Now it was all coming to an end. Marcus was 42 years old. He had a wife named Sarah and 2 children, Emily and Jacob. Emily was 14 and Jacob was 11. They lived in a small house with a mortgage that seemed to grow bigger every year. Sarah worked as a nurse, but her salary alone would not be enough to pay all their bills. The thought of telling his family that he had lost his job made Marcus feel sick. He tried to remember when things had started going wrong. For the first few years of his career, teaching had been wonderful. His students were excited to learn. They asked questions and participated in discussions. They wrote thoughtful essays and actually read the books he assigned. Marcus would go home every day feeling proud and fulfilled. He believed he was making a difference in young people's lives. But slowly, things had changed. Students became less interested in reading classic literature. They would rather look at their phones than discuss Shakespeare or Hemingway. When Marcus tried to talk about important themes in books, most students just stared at their desks or whispered to their friends. Classroom discussions that once lasted the entire period now died after just a few minutes. The energy and excitement were gone. Marcus had tried everything he could think of. He showed movies based on the books. He let students work in groups. He created fun projects and activities. Nothing seemed to work. The students simply did not care about the material anymore. They saw reading classic literature as boring and pointless. When Marcus assigned homework, most students did not do it. When he gave tests, the scores kept getting lower and lower. The school administration had noticed the problems. Last year, Principal Henderson had called Marcus to her office twice. She showed him reports about his classroom management issues. She pointed out that his students' test scores were among the lowest in the English department. She said parents had complained that their children were not learning anything in his class. Principal Henderson had given Marcus formal warnings. She told him he needed to improve or there would be consequences. Marcus had really tried to do better. He attended workshops on classroom management. He read books about engaging modern students. He stayed up late creating new lesson plans. But nothing changed. His 4th period class was the worst. 30 senior students who seemed to hate being there. They talked constantly. They ignored his instructions. Some of them fell asleep at their desks. Others left the room without asking permission. Marcus felt like he had lost all control. On Monday morning of this week, Marcus had tried to teach a lesson about The Great Gatsby. It was one of his favorite books. He loved the story of Jay Gatsby and his impossible dream. He wanted his students to understand the beautiful writing and the important themes about the American dream. But as he stood at the front of the classroom trying to explain the symbolism of the green light, nobody listened. Students were texting under their desks. 2 boys in the back were watching videos on a phone. A group of girls talked about weekend plans. Marcus raised his voice, but it made no difference. At one point, he stopped talking completely. He just stood there in silence, hoping the students would notice and quiet down. Some of them did not even realize he had stopped. The few students who were paying attention looked at him with pity in their eyes. Marcus felt humiliated and defeated. He somehow made it through the rest of the class, but he knew it had been a disaster. Principal Henderson had been walking past his classroom during that lesson. Through the small window in the door, she had seen everything. The chaos, the disrespect, the complete lack of learning. Later that day, she sent him the email about Friday's meeting. Now Marcus sat alone in his classroom after school, wondering what had gone wrong. He had become a teacher because he loved books and wanted to share that love with young people. He believed that literature could change lives, open minds, and help students understand the world better. He remembered being a student himself and having teachers who inspired him. He wanted to be that kind of teacher for others, but somewhere along the way he had failed. Maybe he was too old-fashioned. Maybe students today needed something different that he could not provide. Maybe he simply was not good enough. The thought filled him with sadness and shame. Marcus thought about what he would do if he lost his job. He could try to find a teaching position at another school, but who would hire a teacher who had been fired? He could look for a completely different kind of work. But what skills did he have besides teaching? He had spent his entire adult life in education. The idea of starting over in a new career at his age seemed impossible. He packed his bags slowly and turned off the lights in his classroom. As he walked through the empty hallways toward the parking lot, he felt like he was saying goodbye. In just a few days, this might not be his school anymore. These might not be his students. This might not be his life. When Marcus got home, Sarah could tell something was wrong. She asked him about his day, but he could not bring himself to tell her about the email. Not yet, he just said he was tired. That night he barely slept. He kept thinking about Friday's meeting and what Principal Henderson would say. He imagined packing up his classroom, returning his keys, and walking out of Lincoln High School for the last time. The next few days passed in a blur. Marcus went through the motions of teaching, but his heart was not in it anymore. What was the point? He was going to be fired anyway. Students sensed his lack of energy and behaved even worse than usual. It was a downward spiral with no way out. By Wednesday afternoon, Marcus had accepted his fate. His teaching career was over. Wednesday afternoon brought an interruption that Marcus did not expect. He was sitting at his desk grading essays when his phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. Marcus almost did not answer. He was not in the mood to talk to anyone. But something made him pick up the call. A young woman's voice came through the speaker. She spoke quickly and sounded excited. She said her name was Jennifer Park, and she worked as a production assistant for a film studio. Marcus had no idea why a film studio would be calling him. He wondered if this was some kind of sales call or scam, but he listened anyway. Jennifer explained that a movie was being filmed in the area. The production team needed to shoot some scenes at a real high school. They had contacted several schools in the district, and Lincoln High School had agreed to let them use the building. The school would receive a payment for allowing the filming. Marcus vaguely remembered getting an email about this a few weeks ago, but he had not paid much attention to it. Then Jennifer said something that caught his attention. The film crew wanted to shoot a scene in an actual classroom with real students. Not actors pretending to be students, but genuine high school kids. They wanted the scene to feel authentic and natural, and they had specifically requested to use Marcus's fourth period English class. Marcus was confused. Why would they want his classroom? His fourth period class was a disaster. Those students could barely sit still for 5 minutes. How could they possibly behave well enough for a movie shoot? Jennifer explained that the director wanted a realistic high school environment. They did not want a perfect, controlled classroom. They wanted real teenage energy and authenticity. Jennifer continued talking. She said the filming would take place on Thursday tomorrow. The shoot would last for about an hour during fourth period. The students would be told about it in advance. The film crew would set up cameras in the back of the room and along the sides. They would try to be as quiet and unobtrusive as possible. Marcus would teach a regular lesson while they filmed. Then Jennifer mentioned something else. The lead actor in the film wanted to interact with real students as part of the scene. He was very famous, she said, though she could not reveal his name yet due to contract requirements. This actor wanted to sit in on the class and talk with the students about education and following dreams. He believed in the power of learning and wanted to share his story with young people. Marcus felt skeptical. A famous actor wanted to visit his failing classroom and talk to his disinterested students. It sounded strange. He asked Jennifer why the actor would want to do this. She explained that this actor had a real passion for education. He had struggled in school himself when he was young. A teacher had once changed his life by believing in him. Now that he was successful, he wanted to give back and inspire students. Marcus thought about saying no. He had enough problems without adding a movie shoot to the mix. His classroom was chaotic enough without cameras and film crews, and he was going to be fired in 2 days anyway. Why should he agree to this? But then he thought about his students. Maybe meeting a famous actor would be exciting for them. Maybe it would be one good memory before he left Lincoln High School forever. He also thought about the timing. The filming would be on Thursday. His meeting with Principal Henderson was scheduled for Friday afternoon. This would be one of his last days teaching these students. What did he have to lose? His job was already gone. At least the students might get something positive out of this experience. Marcus told Jennifer he would agree to let them film in his classroom. She sounded thrilled. She thanked him several times and said the production team would send over paperwork for him to sign. They would also send permission forms for the students' parents. Everything would be arranged by tomorrow morning. After hanging up, Marcus sat quietly for a moment. He still was not sure this was a good idea. His fourth period class was unpredictable. With cameras in the room and a celebrity present, who knew what might happen? The students might act even worse than usual. They might try to show off or cause disruptions, or they might completely freeze up and refuse to participate. Either way, it could be embarrassing for everyone. That evening, Marcus told Sarah about the phone call. She was surprised and curious. She asked if Jennifer had mentioned which actor would be visiting. Marcus said no, the name was being kept secret. Sarah thought the whole thing sounded exciting. She encouraged Marcus to approach it with a positive attitude. Maybe it would be fun. Maybe something good would come from it. Marcus wished he could share her optimism, but he felt too defeated to get excited about anything. Still, he prepared a lesson for Thursday's class. He decided to continue with The Great Gatsby, since that was what they had been studying. He would teach normally and just ignore the cameras. The famous actor could sit in the back and observe if he wanted. Marcus would not change his approach or try to put on a show. The next morning, Marcus arrived at school early. The film crew was already there, unloading equipment from large trucks. The school hallways buzzed with excitement. Students had heard about the filming and everyone was curious. Some kids were trying to guess which movie was being made and which actors might appear. In the main office, Marcus signed the paperwork that Jennifer had mentioned. The school secretary gave him a stack of permission forms that students' parents had signed overnight. Apparently, the school had sent out an email blast to all parents explaining the situation. Most parents had been happy to let their children participate. A few students whose parents had not given permission would spend that period in the library instead. Marcus went to his classroom to prepare. The film crew had not arrived yet to set up their equipment. He arranged chairs and checked that he had everything he needed for the lesson. He wrote discussion questions on the board. He tried to imagine how the class would go with cameras watching. His stomach felt tight with nervousness. During first and second period, Marcus taught his other classes. Word had spread quickly about the filming happening during fourth period. Students kept asking him questions. Who was the famous actor? What movie was being made? Could they come watch? Marcus had no answers. He just said that a film crew would be in the school and they should focus on their own lessons. By third period, the film crew had arrived at his classroom to set up. There were about 8 people carrying cameras, lights, microphones, and other equipment Marcus did not recognize. A man who introduced himself as the director explained where they would position everything. He assured Marcus that they would be quiet during the lesson. They wanted to capture natural interactions, not staged performances. Jennifer, the production assistant who had called him, was there too. She smiled warmly at Marcus and thanked him again for agreeing to this. She said the actor would arrive shortly before fourth period started. She still would not tell Marcus who it was. She said the surprise would make the students' reactions more genuine on camera. As the crew finished setting up, Marcus felt increasingly anxious. The period was about to start. His most difficult students would soon walk through that door. A famous actor was coming to watch him teach. Cameras would record everything. And all of this was happening one day before he would probably be fired. Marcus took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. Whatever happened in the next hour, at least it would be interesting. At least it would be different from his usual struggling lessons. He stood at the front of the room and waited for the bell to ring. The bell rang and students began filing into the classroom. They immediately noticed the cameras and equipment set up around the room. Their eyes went wide with excitement. Everyone started talking at once, asking questions and trying to figure out what was happening. The usual bored expressions on their faces had been replaced with curiosity and energy. Marcus stood at the front of the room trying to get their attention. He raised his voice over the noise and asked everyone to take their seats. The students obeyed, but they kept looking around at the cameras and whispering to each other. Marcus could see the film crew positioned quietly in the corners and along the back wall. Their cameras were already recording. He began taking attendance, calling out names one by one. Every student was present today. That was unusual. Normally, several students arrived late or skipped class entirely. But today, everyone had shown up on time. They did not want to miss whatever was about to happen. After attendance, Marcus tried to start the lesson. He reminded the class that they were studying The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. He asked if anyone had finished reading the assigned chapters. A few hands went up, which was more than usual. But most students still seemed more interested in the cameras than in the book. Marcus was about to ask his first discussion question when the classroom door opened. Everyone turned to look. A tall, muscular man walked into the room. He was bald and wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans. For a split second, Marcus did not recognize him. Then his brain registered who he was seeing. Vin Diesel had just walked into his classroom. The famous action movie star stood in the doorway for a moment, looking around at the students. A huge smile spread across his face. The classroom erupted. Students jumped up from their seats. Girls screamed. Boys shouted. Everyone started talking and pointing. Some students pulled out their phones to take pictures before remembering that phones were not allowed during class. Vin Diesel raised his hands and gestured for everyone to calm down. His deep voice filled the room. He said hello and asked everyone to please sit down. He said he was there to learn, not to disrupt the class. The students slowly settled back into their seats, but the energy in the room was electric. No one could believe that Vin Diesel was standing in their English class. Marcus stood frozen at the front of the room. He had no idea what to do or say. This was not what he had expected. When Jennifer mentioned a famous actor, Marcus had imagined someone showing up to give a short, inspirational speech. He did not think the actor would actually participate in the lesson. Vin Diesel walked calmly to an empty desk near the back of the room. He pulled out the chair and sat down like he was just another student. He took out a notebook and pen from a bag he was carrying. Then he looked up at Marcus expectantly, waiting for the lesson to continue. The classroom was completely silent now. 30 students stared at the movie star sitting among them. Marcus cleared his throat and tried to remember what he had been about to say. His mind felt blank. He looked down at his lesson plan on the desk, but the words seemed to swim on the page. He decided to just continue with the discussion questions he had prepared. His voice sounded shaky as he asked the first question. He wanted to know what students thought about Jay Gatsby's character. Was Gatsby a hero or a fool for chasing his dream of being with Daisy? For a long moment, nobody responded. The students seemed too shocked to think about the question. Then something unexpected happened. Vin Diesel raised his hand. Marcus blinked. A famous movie star was raising his hand in his classroom, asking permission to speak. Marcus nodded at him, not trusting his voice. Vin Diesel spoke in his distinctive deep voice. He said he had a question about Gatsby's dream. He wanted to know why Marcus thought F. Scott Fitzgerald made the dream impossible to achieve. Why did the author create a story where the main character could never get what he wanted, no matter how hard he tried? Marcus was stunned. This was a thoughtful, intelligent question about the book. It showed that Vin Diesel had actually read The Great Gatsby and understood its themes. Marcus found his voice and began to answer. He talked about how Fitzgerald was writing about the American dream, and how it could be both beautiful and destructive. He explained that Gatsby's dream was based on an illusion, on wanting to recreate the past, which is impossible. Vin Diesel listened carefully and nodded. Then he asked another question. He wanted to know if Marcus thought people should stop chasing impossible dreams, or if the act of dreaming itself had value even when the dream could not come true. This was exactly the kind of deep discussion that Marcus loved, but rarely got to have with his students anymore. He felt his passion for teaching beginning to wake up. He answered thoughtfully, saying that the book suggested both things could be true. Dreams give people purpose and motivation, but they can also blind people to reality and lead to tragedy. Something remarkable began to happen. Other students started raising their hands. Maria Gonzalez, a quiet girl who never participated, wanted to add something. She said that maybe Gatsby was admirable because he never gave up, even though his dream was impossible. At least he tried to make something of himself instead of just accepting his circumstances. Another student disagreed. Tyler Chen said that Gatsby was foolish because he built his whole life around one person. He became rich and threw parties just to impress Daisy. That was not healthy or smart. Soon more hands went up. Students who had ignored this book for weeks suddenly had opinions about it. They began debating with each other about Gatsby's choices, Daisy's character, and the meaning of the green light. Marcus guided the discussion, asking follow-up questions and making sure everyone had a chance to speak. Vin Diesel participated like a regular student. He listened when others talked. He raised his hand before speaking. He built on what other students said and asked them questions, but he also shared something personal. He told the class that he had struggled in school when he was young. He did not fit in and did not always see the point of education. The students listened with complete attention. Vin Diesel told them about a teacher who changed his life. This teacher introduced him to theater and acting. The teacher also encouraged him to read literature, including The Great Gatsby. That teacher believed in him when nobody else did. That teacher saw potential in him that he did not see in himself. Vin Diesel explained that he had not become famous quickly or easily. Before the Fast and Furious movies made him a star, he had struggled for years. He had been homeless at one point. He had worked odd jobs and faced constant rejection, but he never stopped chasing his dream of being an actor. His story was not that different from Jay Gatsby's in some ways, except that his dream eventually came true. He told the students that education mattered. Reading mattered. Understanding stories and characters helped people understand themselves and the world. He said he still loved literature and even taught English himself before breaking into films. He was not just an action star. He was someone who valued learning and creativity. The students were mesmerized. They asked him questions about his movies, but also about his life and his journey to success. Vin Diesel answered honestly. He did not pretend everything had been easy. He talked about facing discrimination in Hollywood, about being told he did not look right for certain roles, about the years of struggle and doubt. Marcus watched in amazement. His classroom had completely transformed. These were the same students who usually slept, texted, and ignored everything he said. Now they were engaged, asking questions, thinking critically about literature and life. The discussion that was supposed to last maybe 15 minutes had gone on for 40 minutes. Nobody wanted it to end. Even the film crew seemed surprised. They kept their cameras rolling, capturing everything. The director stood in the back with a smile on his face. This was clearly better than what they had planned to film. As the period drew to a close, Marcus felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt like a real teacher again. He felt like he was making a difference. For 1 hour, his classroom had been exactly what he had always dreamed it could be. Students learning, thinking, discussing, and connecting with the material. When the bell rang, nobody moved at first. Then slowly, students began gathering their things. But instead of rushing out like they usually did, they approached Marcus's desk. Several students wanted to talk more about the book. Others thanked Vin Diesel for visiting. A few students apologized to Marcus for their behavior in previous classes. Maria Gonzalez stayed behind after everyone else had left. She looked nervous but determined. She told Marcus that she had not turned in any assignments all semester because she thought English class was pointless. But today had changed her mind. She asked if she could rewrite her essay on The Great Gatsby. She wanted to try again. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes but held them back. He told Maria yes, of course she could rewrite the essay. He would give her a new deadline. He was proud of her for wanting to try. After Maria left, Marcus sat down at his desk. His hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline of what had just happened. The film crew was packing up their equipment, but they moved quietly, giving him space. Vin Diesel was talking with the director and Jennifer in the back of the room. Marcus could hear them discussing how well the scene had gone. He looked around his classroom and noticed things he had not seen before. Books that he thought nobody cared about were now sitting on students' desks, bookmarks placed in the pages they had reached. The questions he had written on the board had actually been discussed, something that rarely happened. The room felt different somehow, like it had been filled with new energy. Then Vin Diesel walked over to Marcus's desk. The director and Jennifer had stepped out into the hallway. It was just the two of them in the classroom now. The movie star pulled up a student chair and sat down across from Marcus. His expression was serious but kind. Vin Diesel thanked Marcus for allowing them to film in his classroom. But then he said something unexpected. He told Marcus that he could see Marcus was a real teacher, someone who truly cared about his students and his subject. He said he had been in many classrooms over the years for various projects, and he could always tell the difference between teachers who were just going through the motions and teachers who had genuine passion. Marcus did not know what to say. He felt like he should be honest. He told Vin Diesel that what happened today was not normal. Usually his classes were disasters. Students did not participate or care. He was actually about to be fired. Tomorrow he had a meeting with the principal that would probably end his teaching career. Vin Diesel listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished talking, the actor nodded slowly. He said he understood. Teaching was one of the hardest jobs in the world. He had taught English himself before becoming an actor, so he knew the challenges. He knew how difficult it was to reach students, especially in modern times with so many distractions competing for their attention. But then Vin Diesel said something that struck Marcus deeply. He said that the passion Marcus showed during today's discussion proved he was meant to be a teacher. The way Marcus had answered questions, guided the conversation, and connected the book's themes to real life showed skill and dedication. Those abilities did not disappear just because students were difficult. The spark was still there inside Marcus. It had just been buried under frustration and discouragement. Vin Diesel shared more of his own story. He talked about his teacher, the one who had believed in him. That teacher had faced many of the same struggles Marcus was facing. Difficult students, lack of support, pressure from administration. But that teacher never gave up. That teacher kept showing up every day and looking for ways to connect with students. One of those students was a young man who would later become an action movie star. He told Marcus that teachers never really know which students they are reaching. Sometimes the impact does not show up until years later. Some kid who seemed completely disengaged might actually be listening and learning. Some student who never says thank you might carry a teacher's words with them for the rest of their life. Teaching was an act of faith. You had to believe you were making a difference even when you could not see the results. Marcus felt emotion rising in his chest. He had forgotten these truths. He had let the daily struggles convince him that he was failing. But maybe failure and success in teaching could not be measured the way administrators tried to measure them with test scores and statistics. Maybe real teaching happened in moments like what occurred today, when students suddenly connected with material in a meaningful way. Vin Diesel then did something surprising. He asked if he could stay for Marcus's next 2 classes. He wanted to see how Marcus taught other groups of students. He wanted to participate in more discussions. The film crew did not need to film anymore. They had gotten what they needed for the movie. But Vin Diesel wanted to stay just for the experience of being a student again. Marcus was shocked but agreed. 5th period would start in a few minutes. That class was slightly better than 4th period but still had its challenges. Vin Diesel said he would sit quietly in the back and just observe. Marcus could teach normally without worrying about the cameras or making it a special event. When the 5th period bell rang, students walked into the classroom and stopped dead in their tracks. Vin Diesel was sitting at a desk in the back row, reading a copy of The Great Gatsby. Word had already spread through the school about what happened during 4th period, but nobody expected the actor to still be there. The students' reactions were similar to the earlier class. Excitement, disbelief, and lots of questions. But Marcus handled it better this time. He acknowledged that yes, Vin Diesel was sitting in on their class. No, they could not all stop and stare at him. They were going to continue with their regular lesson. If anyone had questions for their guest, they could ask during appropriate moments in the discussion. This class went surprisingly well, too. Students who usually never spoke up suddenly wanted to participate. They wanted to show Vin Diesel that they were smart and engaged. They wanted to make a good impression. And because they were participating, the discussion became lively and interesting. Marcus found himself enjoying teaching again. Vin Diesel did not dominate the conversation this time. He let the students lead. But occasionally he would add a comment or ask a question that pushed the discussion deeper. His presence somehow made the students take the material more seriously. If a famous movie star thought literature was important enough to spend his time discussing it, maybe it actually was important. During 6th period, something even more remarkable happened. This class had some of Marcus's best students, kids who usually did their homework and tried to engage with the material. But even they had become less enthusiastic over the semester. The general culture of the school, where academics were not seen as cool, had affected them too. With Vin Diesel in the room, these students came alive in a new way. They asked sophisticated questions. They made connections between The Great Gatsby and other books they had read. They discussed historical context and literary techniques. Marcus realized these students had been holding back, afraid to seem too interested or too smart in front of their peers. But today they felt free to show their intelligence and curiosity. One student named James Park raised a question about the symbolism of Gatsby's shirts. He wanted to know why Fitzgerald spent so much time describing Gatsby showing his expensive shirts to Daisy. What did that scene mean? Marcus was thrilled. This was exactly the kind of close reading and analysis that he had been trying to teach all semester. Before Marcus could answer, Vin Diesel raised his hand again. He said he had thoughts about that scene too. He explained that the shirts represented Gatsby's transformation and wealth, but also the emptiness of material possessions. Gatsby was trying to prove to Daisy that he was worthy of her love by showing her his stuff. But Daisy's tears in that scene were not tears of happiness. They were tears of regret and sadness about the past that could never be recovered. The student James looked impressed. He said he had not thought about it that way. He had just seen it as Gatsby showing off. But now he understood there were deeper layers to the scene. Other students jumped in with their own interpretations. Marcus guided the discussion, adding insights from literary criticism and connecting the scene to larger themes in the novel. The period flew by. When the bell rang, students actually groaned in disappointment. They wanted to keep talking. Marcus told them they would continue the discussion tomorrow, and that their essays on the novel were due next week. Several students said they were actually looking forward to writing the essays now. After the class ended, Marcus walked with Vin Diesel toward the front office. They had to pass through the main hallway, and students kept stopping to stare or wave. Some asked for autographs or selfies. Vin Diesel was patient and kind with everyone, but he kept the interactions brief. He told students to listen to their teachers and take their education seriously. In the office, Principal Henderson was waiting. She had heard about what happened during 4th period. She had also walked past Marcus's classroom during 6th period and looked through the window. She had seen the engaged, lively discussion happening inside. Her expression was thoughtful and hard to read. Vin Diesel shook hands with Principal Henderson and thanked her for allowing the film crew to use the school. Then he said something unexpected. He told her that Marcus Rivera was an excellent teacher. He said he had been in many classrooms and worked with many educators, and Marcus had a special gift for making literature come alive for students. The principal would be making a big mistake if she did not recognize and support that talent. Principal Henderson looked surprised but nodded. She thanked Vin Diesel for his kind words. After the actor left with his film crew, she turned to Marcus. She did not say much, just that they would talk tomorrow during their scheduled meeting, but her tone had changed. She did not sound angry or disappointed anymore. She sounded thoughtful. Marcus went back to his classroom to gather his things. The room was empty and quiet again, but it felt different than it had yesterday. That evening, Marcus drove home in a daze. His mind kept replaying the events of the day. He still could not fully believe what had happened. Vin Diesel had sat in his classroom. His students had actually engaged with literature. For a few hours, teaching had felt magical again instead of exhausting and defeating. When he walked through his front door, Sarah immediately knew something had changed. She could see it in his face. Marcus told her everything, describing each moment in detail. He talked about how the students had transformed, how they had asked real questions and had meaningful discussions. He told her about his conversation with Vin Diesel and the encouragement he had received. Sarah listened with tears in her eyes. She had watched her husband struggle for so long. She had seen his confidence crumble and his passion fade, but tonight he sounded like the Marcus she had married, the young teacher who believed he could change the world one student at a time. She hugged him tightly and told him she was proud of him. Their children, Emily and Jacob, wanted to hear all about meeting Vin Diesel. They made Marcus describe what the actor looked like in person and what he said. Marcus realized his own kids saw him differently now. He was not just their dad who came home tired and frustrated every day. He was someone who had done something interesting and important. Someone who famous people wanted to spend time with. But even as Marcus enjoyed this moment of happiness with his family, he knew that tomorrow's meeting with Principal Henderson still loomed ahead. One good day did not erase months of struggles. It did not change the test scores or the previous complaints from parents. He tried not to get his hopes up too much. He tried to prepare himself for the likelihood that he would still be fired. That night, Marcus slept better than he had in weeks. When his alarm went off Friday morning, he did not feel the usual dread about going to school. He actually felt curious about how his students would behave today. Would the energy from yesterday carry over, or would everything go back to normal? He arrived at Lincoln High School and immediately sensed something different in the atmosphere. Students were talking about yesterday in the hallways. Some of them stopped Marcus to ask questions about Vin Diesel. Others wanted to tell him they had started reading The Great Gatsby more carefully after the discussions. A few students he did not even teach approached him to say they wished they could have been in the classroom too. In the teacher's lounge, Marcus's colleagues treated him differently as well. Some were jealous of the attention his classroom had received. But others were genuinely interested in what happened. They asked if the actor's visit had really made a difference with the students. Marcus honestly did not know yet. He would find out today. First period was not one of the classes Vin Diesel had visited. Marcus wondered if those students would have heard about yesterday, and if it would affect their behavior. To his surprise, the students came in talking about The Great Gatsby. They had heard from friends about the discussions in other classes. They wanted to have similar conversations. They did not want to be left out. Marcus taught the lesson he had prepared, and the students actually participated. They asked questions. They shared their thoughts. They listened to each other. It was not as electric as yesterday with a movie star in the room, but it was still far better than the usual disengagement and boredom. The same pattern repeated in his second and third period classes. Students who had checked out weeks ago were suddenly showing interest again. Some of them had gone home and actually read more chapters of the book. Others had looked up information about F. Scott Fitzgerald online. The excitement from yesterday had spread through the school, and it was affecting students who had not even been in the classroom. When fourth period arrived, Marcus felt nervous. This was the class that Vin Diesel had visited. This was the group that Principal Henderson would judge him by. Would they go back to their old ways now that the cameras and celebrity were gone? Or had something more lasting changed? The students filed in and Marcus held his breath. They took their seats and looked at him expectantly. There was no chaos or talking over him. They were waiting for him to start the lesson. Marcus launched into a discussion about the next chapters of The Great Gatsby, picking up where they had left off yesterday. What happened next amazed him. Students participated even more actively than they had with Vin Diesel present. It was like yesterday had given them permission to care about the material. They had been reminded that literature could be interesting and relevant. They had seen that discussing books could be engaging rather than boring. Tyler Chen, who usually sat in the back and played games on his phone, raised his hand with a complex question about Gatsby's relationship with his father. Maria Gonzalez, who had asked to rewrite her essay, had actually done it already. She asked if she could share some of her ideas with the class. Other students built on what their classmates said, creating a genuine exchange of ideas. Marcus felt like he was dreaming. This was the class he had always imagined teaching. This was why he had become an educator. He was not talking at bored teenagers. He was having a real conversation with young people who were thinking critically about literature and life. Near the end of the period, Marcus did something he rarely did anymore. He went off script from his lesson plan. He asked the students why they thought yesterday had been different. Why had they engaged with the material when a celebrity was present? And why were they still engaging today? There was a moment of silence. Then a student named Ashley Rodriguez spoke up. She said that yesterday made her realize she had been judging the book without really giving it a chance. Seeing someone as successful as Vin Diesel talk about how much literature meant to him made her reconsider her assumptions. If reading and education could help someone achieve their dreams, maybe it was not as pointless as she had thought. Another student, Marcus Thompson, said something that hit hard. He admitted that he and his friends had been disrespectful to Marcus all semester. They had not tried to learn anything. But yesterday he realized they were not just hurting Marcus. They were hurting themselves. They were wasting an opportunity to actually learn something valuable. He apologized for his behavior. Other students echoed similar sentiments. Some said they had never seen Marcus so energized and passionate as he was during yesterday's discussion. That enthusiasm had been contagious. Some said they realized they had made assumptions about what English class would be like, and those assumptions had become self-fulfilling prophecies. If they expected class to be boring, they made it boring by not participating. Marcus felt overwhelmed with emotion. He thanked his students for their honesty. He admitted that he had also lost his enthusiasm and had stopped believing they could have great discussions. He had let his frustration show, which probably made things worse. But yesterday had reminded him why he loved teaching. Today showed him that positive change was possible if everyone was willing to try. When the bell rang, students left the classroom talking animatedly about the book. Marcus sat down at his desk and put his head in his hands. He felt exhausted, but in a good way. He had taught the way he always dreamed of teaching. His students had learned and grown. This was what education was supposed to feel like. But now came the moment he had been dreading all week. His meeting with Principal Henderson was scheduled for right after school. In a few hours he would learn his fate. Would today's success matter? Would yesterday's magical lesson with Vin Diesel change anything? Or would the principal still decide that months of failure could not be erased by 2 good days? The afternoon passed slowly. During his planning period, Marcus tried to prepare himself for bad news. He thought about what he would say if he was fired. He thought about how he would tell his family. He thought about what his next steps would be. Other teachers stopped by his classroom during that time. Some offered words of encouragement. A few said they had heard rumors that Principal Henderson had been impressed by what she saw yesterday. But nobody knew for sure what would happen. The school ran on rumors and speculation, and Marcus had learned not to put too much faith in what people said. Finally, the last bell of the day rang. Students left the building heading home for the weekend. Teachers gathered their belongings and said goodbye to each other. Marcus stayed in his classroom watching the clock. His meeting was in 15 minutes. He straightened his tie, gathered his thoughts, and walked slowly toward the main office. The secretary told him to have a seat. Principal Henderson would see him in a moment. Marcus sat in the waiting area, his heart pounding. The door to the principal's office was closed. He could not hear anything from inside. He wondered if other administrators were in there preparing to deliver bad news. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 5 minutes, the door opened. Principal Henderson stood there and invited Marcus to come in. Her expression was neutral, giving nothing away. Marcus walked into the office on shaky legs and sat down in the chair across from her desk. He tried to read her face but could not. The principal folded her hands on her desk and looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then she began to speak. Principal Henderson began by acknowledging that this had been a difficult semester for both of them. She reminded Marcus of the problems that had led to this meeting. The classroom management issues, the low test scores, the complaints from parents. She said these were serious concerns that could not be ignored. Marcus braced himself for what he thought would come next, but then the principal surprised him. She said that she had observed something remarkable over the past 2 days. She had seen Marcus's classroom transform from chaos into genuine learning. She had watched students who seemed completely disengaged suddenly become active participants in their own education. And most importantly, she had seen Marcus himself transform back into the passionate teacher she remembered hiring 12 years ago. Principal Henderson admitted that she had been walking past Marcus's room during the lesson with Vin Diesel. She had also looked in during 6th period. What she saw made her think deeply about what was really happening in that classroom. Yes, having a celebrity present had created excitement, but the quality of the discussion, the depth of the questions, and the connections Marcus made between the book and students' lives showed real teaching skill. She told Marcus that she had spent yesterday evening reviewing his file. She went back through his evaluations from previous years. For his first 8 or 9 years at Lincoln High School, Marcus had been an excellent teacher. Students loved his classes. Parents praised his dedication. His colleagues respected him. The problems had only started in the last couple of years. The principal said she had been thinking about what changed. She realized that the school itself had changed. New district policies had put more pressure on standardized test scores. Teachers had less flexibility in their curriculum. Class sizes had increased. Resources had been cut. The culture among students had shifted, with more focus on phones and social media and less on academics. Marcus was not the only teacher struggling with these changes. Principal Henderson said she bore some responsibility for what happened. She had been so focused on test scores and meeting district requirements that she had forgotten about the human side of teaching. She had put pressure on Marcus without offering real support. She had criticized his problems without helping him find solutions. She had been ready to fire him without asking what he needed to succeed. Marcus sat in stunned silence. This was not at all what he expected to hear. He had walked into this office prepared to be terminated. Instead, the principal was admitting her own mistakes and talking about systemic problems beyond his control. He did not know what to say, the principal continued. She said that watching Vin Diesel interact with Marcus's students had been enlightening. The actor had mentioned that he taught English before his film career. He understood the challenges of modern education. His advice to Principal Henderson had been simple. Do not lose good teachers because of bad circumstances. Find ways to support them and help them reconnect with their passion. Principal Henderson said she wanted to propose something different than termination. She wanted to work with Marcus on implementing a new teaching approach. She had been researching methods that other schools use to engage modern students, techniques that incorporated technology, storytelling, current events, and student choice. She thought Marcus could pilot some of these approaches in his classroom. She also wanted to reduce some of the pressures on Marcus. She would work with the district to allow him more flexibility in his curriculum. She would help manage parent expectations and educate them about what meaningful learning looked like, versus just high test scores. She would arrange for Marcus to attend professional development workshops, not as punishment but as genuine support for his growth. Most importantly, Principal Henderson wanted to use the video footage from yesterday's class as a teaching tool. With permission from Marcus and the students, edited clips could be shown to other teachers who were struggling. The footage showed what engagement looked like. It demonstrated how to facilitate discussions, how to connect literature to students' lives, and how to create a classroom environment where thinking mattered more than just finding right answers. Marcus finally found his voice. He asked if this meant he was not being fired. Principal Henderson smiled, something Marcus had not seen her do in a long time. She said no, he was not being fired. She wanted him to stay at Lincoln High School and continue teaching. But she wanted to help him be the best teacher he could be, not just manage him out the door when things got difficult. She acknowledged that the road ahead would not be easy. 2 good days did not solve all the problems. Marcus would still have difficult students and challenging classes. Test scores would not magically improve overnight. Parents might still complain, but the principal was committing to supporting Marcus through these challenges rather than just judging him for them. Marcus felt tears in his eyes but did not try to hide them. He thanked Principal Henderson repeatedly. He said he wanted to try the new approaches she mentioned. He wanted to attend the professional development. He wanted to be better for his students. He admitted he had lost his way and needed help finding it again. The meeting ended with a handshake and a plan to meet again on Monday to discuss specifics. Marcus walked out of the office feeling like a completely different person than the one who walked in. He had been carrying the weight of failure and fear for so long. Now that weight was lifted, he had been given a second chance. That evening, Marcus told Sarah everything that happened. They celebrated with dinner at their favorite restaurant. Emily and Jacob were thrilled that their father was not losing his job. The whole family felt lighter and happier than they had in months. Marcus slept deeply that night without the nightmares about being fired that had plagued him all week. Over the weekend, something else unexpected happened. Vin Diesel sent Marcus a message through the film production company. The actor thanked Marcus for letting him be a student again, even briefly. He said the experience reminded him why he loved teaching and why education mattered. He wanted to do something to support Marcus and his students. The message included details about a donation Vin Diesel was making to Lincoln High School's English department. The money would be used to buy new books, classroom technology, and resources that Marcus could use to implement more engaging teaching methods. The actor also sent signed copies of his favorite books for Marcus's classroom library, with personal messages encouraging students to read. The story of what happened in Marcus's classroom began to spread beyond the school. Local news reporters heard about it and wanted to do a story. Marcus was hesitant at first, worried about seeming like he was bragging or taking credit for something a celebrity had done. But Principal Henderson encouraged him to share the story. She thought it could inspire other teachers and students. The news coverage was positive and thoughtful. The reporters focused not just on Vin Diesel's visit, but on the larger lesson about education. They talked about how teachers often go unrecognized for their hard work. They discussed how difficult it is to engage modern students. They highlighted the importance of supporting teachers instead of just criticizing them when things go wrong. Other schools reached out to Principal Henderson asking about the teaching methods they were implementing. Districts wanted to know how to recreate the kind of engagement that happened in Marcus's classroom. Educational consultants called wanting to use the story in their training programs. What started as one teacher's near failure became a case study in how to turn things around. But for Marcus, the real impact was not in the attention or recognition. It was in his classroom every single day. His students continued to show up engaged and ready to learn. Not every class was perfect. There were still difficult days and challenging moments. But the overall culture had shifted. Students saw the value in what they were studying. They respected Marcus and wanted to learn from him. Maria Gonzalez became one of his best students. Her rewritten essay on The Great Gatsby was thoughtful and well-written. She started participating regularly in discussions and helping other students understand difficult concepts. Marcus wrote her a letter of recommendation later that year when she applied to colleges. She was accepted to her first choice school with a scholarship. Tyler Chen, the student who had apologized in class, became a leader among his peers. He encouraged other students to give literature a chance. He organized a book club that met after school. He discovered he actually loved reading and wanted to study literature in college. Marcus never would have predicted this transformation from a kid who used to sleep through class. Other students showed growth in their own ways. Some improved their grades significantly. Others developed critical thinking skills that helped them in all their classes. A few discovered passions they did not know they had. Marcus could not take all the credit for these changes. The students themselves had to do the work. But he had helped create an environment where growth was possible. The principal folded her hands on her desk and looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then she began to speak. Principal Henderson began by acknowledging that this had been a difficult semester for both of them. She reminded Marcus of the problems that had led to this meeting. The classroom management issues, the low test scores, the complaints from parents. She said these were serious concerns that could not be ignored. Marcus braced himself for what he thought would come next, but then the principal surprised him. She said that she had observed something remarkable over the past 2 days. She had seen Marcus's classroom transform from chaos into genuine learning. She had watched students who seemed completely disengaged suddenly become active participants in their own education. And most importantly, she had seen Marcus himself transform back into the passionate teacher she remembered hiring 12 years ago. Principal Henderson admitted that she had been walking past Marcus's room during the lesson with Vin Diesel. She had also looked in during 6th period. What she saw made her think deeply about what was really happening in that classroom. Yes, having a celebrity present had created excitement, but the quality of the discussion, the depth of the questions, and the connections Marcus made between the book and students' lives showed real teaching skill. She told Marcus that she had spent yesterday evening reviewing his file. She went back through his evaluations from previous years. For his first 8 or 9 years at Lincoln High School, Marcus had been an excellent teacher. Students loved his classes. Parents praised his dedication. His colleagues respected him. The problems had only started in the last couple of years. The principal said she had been thinking about what changed. She realized that the school itself had changed. New district policies had put more pressure on standardized test scores. Teachers had less flexibility in their curriculum. Class sizes had increased. Resources had been cut. The culture among students had shifted, with more focus on phones and social media and less on academics. Marcus was not the only teacher struggling with these changes. Principal Henderson said she bore some responsibility for what happened. She had been so focused on test scores and meeting district requirements that she had forgotten about the human side of teaching. She had put pressure on Marcus without offering real support. She had criticized his problems without helping him find solutions. She had been ready to fire him without asking what he needed to succeed. Marcus sat in stunned silence. This was not at all what he expected to hear. He had walked into this office prepared to be terminated. Instead, the principal was admitting her own mistakes and talking about systemic problems beyond his control. He did not know what to say, the principal continued. She said that watching Vin Diesel interact with Marcus's students had been enlightening. The actor had mentioned that he taught English before his film career. He understood the challenges of modern education. His advice to Principal Henderson had been simple. Do not lose good teachers because of bad circumstances. Find ways to support them and help them reconnect with their passion. Principal Henderson said she wanted to propose something different than termination. She wanted to work with Marcus on implementing a new teaching approach. She had been researching methods that other schools use to engage modern students, techniques that incorporated technology, storytelling, current events, and student choice. She thought Marcus could pilot some of these approaches in his classroom. She also wanted to reduce some of the pressures on Marcus. She would work with the district to allow him more flexibility in his curriculum. She would help manage parent expectations and educate them about what meaningful learning looked like, versus just high test scores. She would arrange for Marcus to attend professional development workshops, not as punishment but as genuine support for his growth. Most importantly, Principal Henderson wanted to use the video footage from yesterday's class as a teaching tool. With permission from Marcus and the students, edited clips could be shown to other teachers who were struggling. The footage showed what engagement looked like. It demonstrated how to facilitate discussions, how to connect literature to students' lives, and how to create a classroom environment where thinking mattered more than just finding right answers. Marcus finally found his voice. He asked if this meant he was not being fired. Principal Henderson smiled, something Marcus had not seen her do in a long time. She said no, he was not being fired. She wanted him to stay at Lincoln High School and continue teaching. But she wanted to help him be the best teacher he could be, not just manage him out the door when things got difficult. She acknowledged that the road ahead would not be easy. 2 good days did not solve all the problems. Marcus would still have difficult students and challenging classes. Test scores would not magically improve overnight. Parents might still complain, but the principal was committing to supporting Marcus through these challenges rather than just judging him for them. Marcus felt tears in his eyes but did not try to hide them. He thanked Principal Henderson repeatedly. He said he wanted to try the new approaches she mentioned. He wanted to attend the professional development. He wanted to be better for his students. He admitted he had lost his way and needed help finding it again. The meeting ended with a handshake and a plan to meet again on Monday to discuss specifics. Marcus walked out of the office feeling like a completely different person than the one who walked in. He had been carrying the weight of failure and fear for so long. Now that weight was lifted, he had been given a second chance. That evening, Marcus told Sarah everything that happened. They celebrated with dinner at their favorite restaurant. Emily and Jacob were thrilled that their father was not losing his job. The whole family felt lighter and happier than they had in months. Marcus slept deeply that night without the nightmares about being fired that had plagued him all week. Over the weekend, something else unexpected happened. Vin Diesel sent Marcus a message through the film production company. The actor thanked Marcus for letting him be a student again, even briefly. He said the experience reminded him why he loved teaching and why education mattered. He wanted to do something to support Marcus and his students. The message included details about a donation Vin Diesel was making to Lincoln High School's English department. The money would be used to buy new books, classroom technology, and resources that Marcus could use to implement more engaging teaching methods. The actor also sent signed copies of his favorite books for Marcus's classroom library, with personal messages encouraging students to read. The story of what happened in Marcus's classroom began to spread beyond the school. Local news reporters heard about it and wanted to do a story. Marcus was hesitant at first, worried about seeming like he was bragging or taking credit for something a celebrity had done. But Principal Henderson encouraged him to share the story. She thought it could inspire other teachers and students. The news coverage was positive and thoughtful. The reporters focused not just on Vin Diesel's visit, but on the larger lesson about education. They talked about how teachers often go unrecognized for their hard work. They discussed how difficult it is to engage modern students. They highlighted the importance of supporting teachers instead of just criticizing them when things go wrong. Other schools reached out to Principal Henderson asking about the teaching methods they were implementing. Districts wanted to know how to recreate the kind of engagement that happened in Marcus's classroom. Educational consultants called wanting to use the story in their training programs. What started as one teacher's near failure became a case study in how to turn things around. But for Marcus, the real impact was not in the attention or recognition. It was in his classroom every single day. His students continued to show up engaged and ready to learn. Not every class was perfect. There were still difficult days and challenging moments. But the overall culture had shifted. Students saw the value in what they were studying. They respected Marcus and wanted to learn from him. Maria Gonzalez became one of his best students. Her rewritten essay on The Great Gatsby was thoughtful and well-written. She started participating regularly in discussions and helping other students understand difficult concepts. Marcus wrote her a letter of recommendation later that year when she applied to colleges. She was accepted to her first choice school with a scholarship. Tyler Chen, the student who had apologized in class, became a leader among his peers. He encouraged other students to give literature a chance. He organized a book club that met after school. He discovered he actually loved reading and wanted to study literature in college. Marcus never would have predicted this transformation from a kid who used to sleep through class. Other students showed growth in their own ways. Some improved their grades significantly. Others developed critical thinking skills that helped them in all their classes. A few discovered passions they did not know they had. Marcus could not take all the credit for these changes. The students themselves had to do the work. But he had helped create an environment where growth was possible. 3 months after the incident with Vin Diesel, something else significant happened. Marcus was nominated for the district's Teacher of the Year award. He did not win, but the nomination itself was meaningful. It showed that his reputation had been restored. He was recognized again as a talented educator, not a failing teacher on the verge of termination. The professional development workshops Principal Henderson arranged were genuinely helpful. Marcus learned new techniques for classroom management and student engagement. He connected with other teachers facing similar challenges. He realized he was not alone in his struggles. Many good teachers were dealing with the same issues he had faced. Marcus also learned to be more honest with his students about his own learning process. He admitted when lessons did not work well and asked for their feedback. He involved them in creating classroom norms and expectations. He showed them that education was a partnership, not just him talking at them. This vulnerability and openness strengthened his relationships with students. Principal Henderson kept her promises too. She gave Marcus more curriculum flexibility. She supported him when parents complained. She visited his classroom regularly, not to criticize but to observe and offer suggestions. She celebrated his successes and helped him learn from his mistakes. Their relationship transformed from adversarial to collaborative. Looking back months later, Marcus realized that being on the verge of getting fired had been painful but necessary. It forced him to confront what was not working. It made him question his assumptions and methods. It humbled him and reminded him that teaching was not about ego or control. It was about connecting with students and helping them learn and grow. The visit from Vin Diesel had been the catalyst, but it was not really about the celebrity. It was about being reminded why literature mattered, why teaching mattered, and why Marcus himself mattered. One person believing in him and showing interest in his work had reignited his passion. That passion then spread to his students and created real change. Marcus kept a photo from that day on his desk. It showed Vin Diesel sitting at a student desk with his hand raised, and Marcus standing at the front of the room smiling. Looking at that photo reminded Marcus of several important lessons. Never give up on difficult students because you never know who might be listening. Never lose sight of why you started teaching in the first place. And sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, one unexpected moment can change everything. Years later, Marcus was still teaching at Lincoln High School. He had become a mentor to new teachers, helping them avoid the mistakes he made. He shared his story openly, including the difficult parts. He wanted other teachers to know that struggling did not mean failing. That asking for help was strength, not weakness. That every teacher, no matter how experienced, could lose their way and need to find it again. The story of the teacher who was about to be fired until Vin Diesel entered the classroom became a legend at Lincoln High School. New students heard about it and asked Marcus if it was true. He always confirmed it was, but he also made sure they understood the deeper lesson. It was not really about a famous actor saving his job. It was about remembering what made education meaningful. It was about students and teachers working together to create something valuable. It was about second chances and new beginnings. And most of all, it was about never giving up on the power of learning to change lives.